Vice News has a really interesting article that I'm kind of 50-50 on. I think I'm leaning in a certain direction, but I'm curious what everybody thinks, so I wanted to share it with all of you. And I'm going to give you the whole article here, pretty much, because it's really important in that it puts everything into perspective and gives you all the information that you need before you make up your mind. But listen to this. A landlord is suing to evict a tenant from his lower Manhattan apartment after the Confederate flags he hung up in his windows led one local to hurl rocks and another to punch through the glass, DNA Info reports. William Green has leased the fifth-floor apartment in New York City's East Village since 1996 and, according to the lawsuit, has repeatedly violated the objectionable conduct clause of his lease and the city's rent stabilization code. The property owner claims Green really hasn't been a model tenant since moving in, alleging that he's tossed garbage from his windows, chucked a TV down the building's stairs, and blasted offensive music from his apartment. A nearby resident said Green has also shouted racial epithets at people on the streets below. But the owner didn't move to evict Green until filing the lawsuit on Saturday, a week after a violent white supremacist rally in Charlottesville, Virginia, left one woman dead and brought a simmering debate in the U.S. about Confederate symbols and hate groups to a boil. Late last week, that debate spilled into the East Village, where locals became enraged at the sight of the Confederate flags Green had displayed in his windows. On Wednesday, video surfaced of a man hurling rocks at Green's apartment and threatening to break the windows from which the flags hung. "My kids gotta see that shit," he yelled. "Take it down." Police pulled up to the scene and tried, but failed to make contact with Green twice, deciding to stand guard outside of the building for the night out of an abundance of caution. Then on Friday, nearby resident Darren Keene was arrested after reportedly scaling the building and punching through Green's window. The flags have hung backlit from the apartment windows for months. He hung iron crosses before that, but the display has now left tenants afraid for their safety, the lawsuit alleges. It claims several have emailed the building manager asking him to address the situation, adding that they face threats in connection with the display. Landlord Charles Yaski threatened to post Green's photo and contact info on the building's door if he didn't remove the flags. By Saturday, they'd been taken down. The lawsuit asked for permission to keep Green's flags off the windows permanently. Green's neighbor told the New York Daily News she thought he might suffer from mental illness and that she didn't know if he understands what the flag represents. The lawsuit describes him as a clearly disturbed individual and alleges he once tried to throw himself from the fifth-floor window. As local councilwoman Rosie Mendez wrote in a statement last week, the controversy comes down to an issue of free speech, and while Yaski might be able to boot Green from the apartment for violating his lease, legally he can decorate his windows however he likes. Okay, so that is, like, there's multiple layers to this, which is why I think it's so interesting. So first of all, if we were talking about a guy who it was on his own property, so he owns the property, it's his private property, and he puts up whatever symbol he wants, then there's not even close to a conversation over it. It doesn't matter how odious the symbol is, he's allowed to keep it up. It literally doesn't matter what the symbol is. If it's his own private property and he owns it, you could fly a Nazi flag if you want. It's the United States of America. You can do whatever the fuck you want on your private property, fly whatever symbol you want. There's no question about that. Okay, that's just what it is. The reason why this one's in like a weird, bizarre middle ground is that he's renting the property. So in other words, he doesn't own the property. The landlord owns the property. He is renting it. So we go from 100% on the side of sorry, but it doesn't matter what fucking symbol he flies, to now it's like, wait, ultimately doesn't the landlord have the right, since he owns the property, to say, no, I'm not going to let you fly that in my building? Because the landlord gets to make rules because it's his property. So that's the first question. Then the second question is, judging based off these stories and what they're saying about the other tenants in the building, there is a legitimate concern for the safety of the other tenants in the building who are saying, look, man, you know, I'm not safe as a result of this guy's actions. And throwing rocks at the window proves that. The guy walking up, punching through the window proves that. So, like, what are we doing here? You need to tell him to take him down. And you need to address the situation. And then on top of that, you have the third thing, which is potential mental illness. Now, I don't agree with the woman or believe the woman when she says, oh, he doesn't know what those things mean. He knows what it means. If he put up a fucking, the white supremacist cross beforehand and then is doing this now, he knows what it means. But then there also could be a legit mental illness along with that. And if the guy's trying to jump off the fucking building, yeah, you're dealing with that too. So you have other people's safety, the fact it's not his property, he's just renting it, and mental illness. These are all factors. And I honestly don't know what to believe on this. So I always lean in the direction of more free speech, free expression. So my gut reaction was like, okay, I don't care. He has a right to keep it up because he has a reasonable expectation of privacy on his property, even though he's leasing it. So he's renting it. And even the landlord technically owns the building, but in his little place in the building, that is his. He has a reasonable expectation of privacy, and his rights don't go away because he's renting it as opposed to owning it. That was my initial reaction, but reading through the facts, I got more and more like, oh, actually, I don't know. Because of the safety threat to other people, and yeah, because of the fact that the landlord is like, hey, it's my property, and I don't want you flying that, so take it down. I don't know, man. I don't know. I genuinely don't know. I think ultimately, even though the outcome might be worse in terms of safety for people, I think if I was a judge, I probably would rule that he's allowed to keep it up. But then I think it's all a moot point anyway, because what's going to happen is the landlord is going to find one of a number of other things he violated in the contract and just go, that's why we're evicting you. So you see what I'm saying? They could evict him for that other reason, but just say, oh, but when you threw the TV down the stairs, that was a violation of, our contract, and so I'm going to kick you out based off that. Because they said a laundry list of things he did where he's, not been a good tenant. So they could pick one of those other things and say, we're kicking you out for that reason. But as long as they say that violated the contract, even if it's really over the Confederate flag thing, they could get away with it by saying you violated this other part of the contract. So I think that's what's most likely to happen. And I think it's an interesting kind of weird gray area in the First Amendment and free expression because of the multitude of factors that are involved in this. But I'm curious what everybody else thinks.